Yo, what's up? Bill here from Classic Rock and Metal Review, here to talk about a mandatory bootleg. This one is for Ozzy Osbourne, Speak of the Devil, Ritz, 1982, complete. Both shows that were recorded to make the Speak of the Devil album are on this bootleg. It's 2 CDs. Each show is a whole disc. We'll get into the specifics about what turned out on the album and so forth. But first of all, a little background on why the album happened in the first place. Black Sabbath did not make a lot of cash during the 70s. They were placated by management with sort of everything else you could possibly want. Cars, houses, drugs. What they never really thought to ask was, how much money do we have in the bank? And I guess the answer was basically not much. They actually sold away their publishing rights in the 70s and weren't even able to release anything themselves of their own songs. So when We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll came out in 1976, the double album, Greatest Hits, that was against their wishes, and they saw no money for that one. Likewise with 1980's live album, Live at Last. That album was made from a couple of 1973 concerts the band recorded hoping to release as a live album, but they just didn't think it was good enough. The idea was dropped. Past Manager is the one who released that in 1980. Again, the band saw no money at all. So as far as Black Sabbath was concerned, there was a live album that still needed to be made. And Ozzy had signed, after he left Sabbath, actually had a hard time finding anyone to take him on because of his drugs and alcohol. Finally found Jet Records, signed a 4-album deal with them, which wasn't very lucrative, as you can imagine. When you're desperate, you know how it goes. So he already had Diary and Blizzard under his belt, and a double live album of past material, which this way he wouldn't have to write anything new. It could be done in a matter of days, and in fact it was. So he gets out of a contract quick. Black Sabbath gets their live album that they've been wanting to make. And at the same time, both sides, the Sabbath camp and Ozzy camp, all get to finally make some money off their back catalog in a fast way, too. Sabbath, of course, record shows along the way on their Mob Rules tour in 1982. 3 dates specifically ended up being the material on Live Evil. Ozzy, on the other hand, ends up just doing these 2 concerts in New York City in September. But let's back up a little bit. When Ozzy first presents this idea to the band, they are not happy about it at all. And Ozzy's not happy that they're not happy. He basically wants them to be loyal and go through with this and understand his way out of the contract and so on. And eventually they do, but initially they're not pleased at all. And in fact, I think pretty much the entire band will split up after the Speak of the Devil concerts. So let's go back to February, is when Ozzy first presents the idea. Randy Rhoads was going to be the guitarist on the album. He was especially unhappy, feeling that it was a big step back. And, you know, within a month he was dead anyway after the plane crash. So at least that was a moot point. But the other guys still weren't happy, Sarzo and Aldridge. Ozzy recruits Bernie Tormé on guitar for a couple of weeks, and then finally gets a steady replacement to finish the Diary of a Madman tour in Brad Gillis, who was in Night Ranger. At the time, Night Ranger didn't have an album out. That was to come later on that year. But the tour gets finished in August, and just so you know, just to informational purposes, MTV shot and broadcasted a concert from Ozzy from LA in June of '82. The concerts for Speak of the Devil were not going to be recorded till September, but that show for MTV ended up coming out on DVD eventually. It was bootlegged for years, became official maybe 10, 12 years ago. It is not the Speak of the Devil concerts or related to the album. As you can see, they stole the title, but nothing to do with the live album. And This is a knockoff of the video, a CD version of it. Brad Gillis on guitar, tearing it up. It's a great video, but it's the Diary of a Madman tour, just to correct that misnomer. So eventually you get to the point where the band finishes the tour in August, first week of August, second week of August. The concerts for the Speak of the Devil recordings aren't going to be till the 26th and 27th of September. So the band has about 7 weeks in between. Ozzy, being Ozzy, is sort of off the rails. At some point he shaves his head because he's completely bald. The album cover for Speak of the Devil, the live album, is Ozzy wearing a wig. I'm sure a lot of you already know that. But if you didn't, there you go. So you get to the point where the band is in New York about a week before the shows to rehearse, and lo and behold, no Ozzy. He's off doing his thing. So the band has to learn 12 songs in five or 6 days without the only guy from the band they're doing them from. So I think that's kind of crazy. So Ozzy shows up the day of the first concert, September 26th. They do a rehearsal in the afternoon, and then they do the first show. And just as a review of the concerts, I'm going to tell you, the first show, the band is a little off, especially on the first 3 songs. They just missed their mark timing-wise. Of course, they pound out decent versions, but there's a flub in the beginning of each of the first 3 songs. They pretty much clean it up after that, though. There might be one more flub later on, or a small 1 or 2 later on. So not much was used, if anything, from the first night onto the album, Speak of the Devil. Ozzy's voice sounds pretty good on the first night. He's doing some tough material, Symptom of the Universe and Snowblind, and pulls it off respectably, you know, in the context of Ozzy being Ozzy, which, if anyone's seen him before, knows he's never close to perfect live. Second night, the band is tighter, and now Ozzy's voice is a little shot. You know, most of the material he's fine, but there's a couple songs where he is pretty atrocious. What ends up making the album Speak of the Devil? Well, it's the same set list both nights, and the same songs ended up on the album in the same order. So you have Symptom of the Universe as the opener. It's like one of the best songs ever, right? They sound good doing it. I really love the ending that these guys put on this song. You know, Sabbath just has a kind of way of stopping it, which of course is different than the album. So it kind of ends right at 4 minutes, but the solo Ozzy version here sounds great. I love the ending they throw on. It's kind of like a little jam. Doesn't last too long, only goes on 30-40 seconds, but it's really cool. Snowblind is next. Gotta love that one, right? The song Black Sabbath. Ozzy's talking about the old Fillmore days. It's great. Oh yeah, one other little thing too about these songs. You can hear that the band is so unfamiliar with these songs that Ozzy has to sort of, you know, lead them, describe it. You know, he kind of does a na 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 right before NIB, and I think he does the same thing before Sweet Leaf. You can hear him like mouthing the rhythm guitar to the band in the background. So just this bootleg just has so many cool things like that. Also, Ozzy's, if you know Speak of the Devil, you know Ozzy's cursing his head off, you know, or at least it seemed that way when you're 12 years old and you're listening to Speak of the Devil, but it actually isn't too bad. Well, the bootleg is really pretty bad. There's a lot of cursing on here. Ozzy's talking about banging groupies and, you know, doing drugs all night long, and he's pretty reckless. It's great. Next up, you have Fairies Wear Boots, which I think Sabbath pulled back out of the hat again for the 76 tour, maybe 78. I'm not sure which. I have a show from Pittsburgh where they pull that back out of the hat. War Pigs here is good, but nothing special. But then you got The Wizard, which I don't think Sabbath had played probably since 71 or 72. What a great one to pull out of the hat. Followed by NIB. NIB sounds good here. Sweet Leaf, I actually prefer this version over the Sabbath version. I know it's heresy, right? But it just has a little pop to it. hard for me to even describe. I want to say that it's a little faster, but maybe only slightly. It just has an energy to it that the Sabbath version doesn't. So one song I'm going to say, I prefer this version. And then you got Never Say Die. That was once I got this album digested 3 or 4 times when I was 12 when I got it, Never Say Die was my favorite song. I specifically remember someone asking me that question. What's your favorite song on that album? So that's just great. I mean, this was the only time this song was ever played by Sabbath or Ozzy after the Never Say Die tour. So, it's 4 years later, 3-4 years later, and there it is again. It sounds great. And then you got the typical Ozzy finishers, Iron Man, which goes right into Children of the Grave. And you get the encore of Paranoid. But one song on the Speak of the Devil album that's not on these concerts is Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, which they recorded at one of the rehearsals. It was a rehearsal before each show. So, obviously they were able to pull it out of the hat. Now, something I just sort of didn't even mention yet, I guess I take it for granted at this point, and I only really learned this myself maybe 8 years ago or so. Now, I went a long time without listening to Speak of the Devil. Once I got to be 13, 14 years old and started getting all the Sabbath catalog and everything else, kind of just sort of forgot about this album for a long time. But Ozzy re-recorded all of his vocals for the official release. So none of the vocals you hear on here are actually live at all, which is it's kind of a shame because I really think the editing capabilities could have salvaged probably a good 85% of what Ozzy does on these concerts. But I guess they had to be one way or the other just to keep levels consistent, which is a shame. But that's also what makes, this so awesome. You're going to hear the real shows, warts and all. Sometimes the band misses a spot. Sometimes Ozzy's voice is just, cracking and creaking. But it's the real deal. You get 100% of Ozzy's commentary. I think they probably whittled it down to about 30 or 35% of it on the on the Speak of the Devil album. So getting to hear all of it is awesome. Another thing about this album too, I mean, like I said, that this album, I didn't even realize it at the time. It was the first live album I ever owned. And it is genuine 100% live crowd that you hear on here from the Ritz that night. And there's so many live albums that are just using fake crowd noise, stock crowd noise, and I can spot it right away. And I guess I never really thought about it because I spent so many years without listening to this album. But in retrospect, this album ruined every other live album for me, really, with their that fake crowd noise. It's just so easily detectable. There is a party going on at this show, and the crowd is nuts. And one thing I just noticed the other day, listening to the bootleg shows again, is that this show probably didn't even start till 11:30 or something at night. It's because Ozzy mentions it's the witching hour, and early on the third song, I think. So it's just a great experience, especially the bootleg versions, because it is legit. There was one spot I picked up where on Speak of the Devil, they move the crowd noise. Speak of the Devil starts with the crowd chanting Ozzy. That doesn't really happen until they're waiting for the encore. So they just sort of patched it over. But the rest of it is legit. And the way you know it's legit is, Speak of the Devil as well as I do. Then you put on the 2 complete discs, and especially the second one. The second show is where the majority of the material most likely came from, and I just know every little nuance of Speak of the Devil, and the second show has all those nuances. And like I said, extras, especially when it comes to Ozzy's commentary. So bottom line is this: there's a mandatory bootleg session time, and it's this. You need it. Get it. You'll love it. All right, guys. Ozzy. Ritz, 1982 complete, Speak of the Devil, double CD. Oh, and by the way, when you get it, not if, you'll get a copy of this fake Speak of the Devil concert, the DVD that I already showed you the store-bought version. Hopefully you find someone that has this show, the Ritz Complete CDs, and you'll get this bonus DVD with it. No extra charge. So a little bit of coolness there. All right, guys, please, if you can, like the video, subscribe. We're a new channel, so I'd really appreciate that. All right, that'll be it. Later.